ChatGPT defines a badass as someone who exudes confidence, toughness, and authenticity, fearlessly overcoming challenges, mastering their craft, and inspiring others through boldness and resilience. And today, I offer you a synonym to that, David Whitehead, our guest, because good God, this guy's got it. We are about to get into some stuff that you have been asking questions for a very long time. We might have some answers for you.
If you go around the world, you will find different renditions of this exact story and this exact truth, that there's a potentiality in all of us for great evil.
Has World War III already started? What are the three main lies the governments are telling its people? Are there ancient cults in control of our governments and people? And good God, the Masons, the CIA, and everything else, the power dynamics, the secret societies. We get into everything here on this podcast. You are going to love this. Leave us a like, comment down below. Check out thewayofwilljohn.com. Check out our Rumble and all the rest of the stuff. And we will catch you guys on the jump. Much love to you all. Enjoy the podcast.
Way of Will John.
David, what's going on, man? How's it going?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me. Just trying to survive the time that we live in, which is pretty exciting and also terrifying at the same time. But thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what we're going to dig into. That's what we're going to dig into now. So you are a very eclectic, very, let's say, well-mind traveled human being. And so I want to hear how you describe yourself and kind of what you do and what's your mission and goal. We'll start there. You know, who is David Whitehead to you?
Who am I to myself? I guess that's the question we're all trying to figure out, right? Is who are we to ourselves? But no, who I am, I live in British Columbia, Canada, born and raised in Canada. I've been all over the country. I'm a father of two. I run my own martial arts studio full-time. Had some on and off with that during the lockdowns, which led me to do my other work, which is I produce podcasts and media, and I do my own sort of independent journalism on a variety of different subjects. And I went really full-time with that during the lockdowns. And then now I'm back in my martial art role again as a coach. And I'm still doing my work, my podcasting, my research, etc. I host a podcast called the Unslaved Podcast with Michael Tessarian, who hails from Ireland. He's a well-known researcher, and if you haven't gotten into his research, everybody should check him out. And then I do my own independent show called Truth Warrior. Right now, you can find that on places like iTunes, Spotify. So I'm mainly on Substack now and X and whatnot, trying to avoid all the censorship police. And I do discussions and researches into comparative religion and mythology. I'm very fascinated by ancient history and the formation of human civilization and that story. I am very interested also in geopolitics and what's going on in the political world, as we all are, to see what the hell is going on behind that curtain. And I try to look into things like philosophy, personal development, spirituality, and also get into some of the darker subjects from the world of the esoteric and the occult, like conspiratorial subjects. And just trying to basically get a bigger perspective. I think that's what I've always tried to do, is not just look at the world through a small lens, but to really zoom out, pull in as many different subjects and concepts as possible when I'm analyzing not just what's going on in the world, but who am I? Like, what is my role in that world? And so that's kind of where my mind is at. I also like some of the fringe subjects, getting into the paranormal, getting into stuff like UFOs and ancient aliens. I had been on a lot of shows with History Channel prior to the lockdowns. I was actually on Ancient Aliens and Unexplained and some of those types of shows, just for fun, just because it's a curiosity of mine. I've always loved those subjects. But these days, it seems like it's a lot of very serious subjects that I've been getting into, looking at the phenomena of something called totalism, which is basically a sort of a catch-all word for all of these different systems that we're seeing being discussed about government tyranny. You know, we talk about fascism, socialism, communism, all of these isms. And I'm looking at it from a perspective of, well, there's a collectivized totalitarian structure at the root of a lot of these systems. And so I kind of been calling it totalism as a branch term, and really diving into the history of that and how it grew, how these ideas have grown, how they've shown up on both what we call the left and the right, And really, that study is because of my deep love for freedom, and I want to preserve it and find out what the best answer is in that regard. And so, yeah, that's really where I try to pull a lot of my ideas from, is a lot of those subjects. And then in the end, it's all about self-analysis. What can I learn about myself while studying what's going on in the world? So I hope that covers it, but that's a bit of a nutshell of what I'm into.
I love it. And it's actually, it's perfect because you mentioned geopolitics and also you mentioned the ancient world and all this stuff. So, I mean, I have a fascination with every single thing that you've just mentioned. I mean, everyone who's listening, you've hit everything perfectly.
Is your brain productivity awful? Well, you need As a pro footballer, I'm always looking to improve my focus, my problem-solving skills, enhance my memory, and boost my mental alertness. I have got to stay sharp.
In all seriousness, every single one of us can benefit from razor-sharp focus and zero brain fog. If you want the most out of your life, you've got to be at your best. Organized, balanced, and powerful. That's what you get from NewCube. You're a modern human. That means you're staring at a screen, and this means you'll need to protect your eyes from screen fatigue. Well, guess what? NewCube is loaded with LoopMax 2020, which is going to support you exactly with that. NewCube is an all-natural product, so you'll see the best effects after a couple of months with consistent use.
Listen, my friends, learning a language is a tough thing, so check out the link right down below in the description box so you can grab yourself some and get that brain work in. Promo code GOLOREMI20, 20% off.
Let's go from the front to the back. And so we're going to start with the world right now, how it stands, and the geopolitical situation in which every day I'm being told that World War III is right on my doorstep. How do you see this all playing out? Because it's perfect because that you're investigating tyranny and the totalitarian regimes and their plans, and that's going to get us into a little bit of conspiracy. And some people have an inability. I shouldn't say inability. Some people have an inability for sure, but other people have, let's say, just a blind spot into the potential, how deep a conspiracy can go and what a conspiracy is, right? Conspiracy theory has been weaponized. To say that word, you just, it's supposed to be a blanket term for like, oh, okay, he's crazy. Well, then let's just ignore that. They're conspiring. So let's start there. How do you see this playing out? Why is the world this way? And who's making these calls, making these moves? How do you predict these next few months, years? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a few podcasts all in themselves for this, but we'll do our best. These are the things that I think are on everybody's mind, as you said, and I'm definitely on my mind, and I don't claim to have the answer to it all, but I've just thought about it a lot. I've had the opportunity to interview some really brilliant people over my time doing the shows that I've done and the researches I've done. And then I've just tried to pay attention to the best that I can. And we're all trying to sift through information, which is a really difficult task these days, because I actually think we're in World War III right now. It's just that World War III hasn't gone kinetic yet. It's more of an asymmetric type of information, mind manipulation kind of war. And the minute I say manipulation, people can go, oh, conspiracy. And yeah, there's plenty of that to find. And I guess I'm in the place where I'm like, hey, we have to get people out of this very naive position that there is no such thing as conspiracy, that it doesn't exist. And in a minute, I'll define what I mean when I use that word. But we also got to be careful. We don't think that everything is a conspiracy and that evil runs everything and it's just all dark and bleak and we're all becoming a bunch of doomers here, right? Mm-hmm. So I try to, I'm one of those, I like to think I'm one of the fewer voices in what you could call the alternative research, truth, freedom, conspiracy world that's still trying to have some semblance of hope in the future. And not some pie in the sky hopium, but like rational means for hope towards the future, which I think we need if we're in a battle scenario like a World War III or we're fighting in the West and all over the world for our freedom, right? So Yeah, the way I see it is we are doing it to ourselves in a lot of ways as humans. I mean, wherever we go, there we are. And we have people that have gotten into positions of power, authority, and trust that pretended to be there on the best interests of the vast majority of humanity, but have betrayed that trust clearly and are operating towards some other agenda that is not what we think it is. And many of the people I think that are involved in that, maybe on the political level or in the media or in some of these other elements like pharma or the medical world or anywhere you want to go, there's a lot of people that are well-meaning that are involved in, I think, something that is a lot darker and a lot more nefarious. And then you could be thinking, well, what are we talking about here? Well, I did a whole documentary series called Cult of the Medics, and it's a free documentary series. I'm 10 parts in. People can get it over on my Substack for free. You can just look up Cult of the Medics. It's all over the place. And it's I take people through step by step my thinking on all these questions. And I did it during the lockdowns with the pandemic because I had noticed patterns about what I'm talking about in that instance, in that pandemic scenario. I was like, okay, this is sort of a culmination of a lot of the research I had done previously about this Game of Thrones that's going on behind the scenes that a lot of people maybe not be aware of. So before we dive into that, I just want to sum it up by saying, for me, if you think of that word conspiracy and then think about conspiracy theory, which I think is a weaponized term, propaganda term, conspiracy exists in our legal language. There's such a thing as criminal conspiracy. People are charged for criminal conspiracy all the time. You can go to a local courthouse and someone has been committing conspiracy to commit fraud or murder or whatever. And all conspiring is coming together, breathing together in a criminal or immoral way with others. So it's two or more people coming together to plan something illegal, immoral. And I feel like that's actually more common than it's not. And I find it really gobsmacking that we're still like, well, if you're talking about people working together to achieve a dominant advantage over others and lying and committing illegal acts to do that, wow, that's just ridiculously insane. I don't know what to tell those people if they have been alive watching even the last few years, let alone paying attention to this for over a decade or more. So there's that. And then I also feel like in this alternative world, there's a lot of psychological operations going on. There's a lot of people that are jumping to conclusions and blowing it out of proportion and making it so grandiose and ridiculous that it's actually casting a lot of shade right now. And I think that's by design. And I also think that's just part of human nature that we tend to do that. So I try to have a much more balanced perspective on it and say, okay, well, there are some things that are conspiracies and there are some things that aren't. Which is up to everybody to look for themselves. But let's just say this. We've been lied to on many levels by those who are in those positions of authority and trust. And it didn't just start with the mainstream media. It's been going on, as I've looked at it, for a lot longer than that. So it goes back through the history of, even the corrupted elements within religious institutions. A lot of the stuff we've been told about history can be reassessed now because we've definitely had a lot of lies there. And then obviously recent history and the history we're living in right now. There's a lot of what we're being presented with and told about that has clearly been shown to be false when it comes to what our governments are telling us, what our media is telling us, and what our education systems are teaching our children. And so I feel like it's up to everybody to investigate these things on their own, think for themselves. And the good news is there has been brilliant minds and great researchers alive for a long time and that are alive right now that are doing phenomenal research to help make that job easier. And all I try to do is draw people's attention to those great works, to those great ideas, and try to re-inspire the spirit of freedom and truth and get people on that track, because that's the only way we're going to save ourselves in this current conflict that we're in.
TheWayofWillJohn.com. Exclusive content and programs on manifestation, making money, hidden knowledge. Finally, reach your full potential. So if I could make it even more pointed then, if you could sum up what the 3 to 5 main lies that we are being told or that we are living with that are shading our real reality, what would those be?
A few different lies. Wow. So many to
The
pick
main
from.
ones, yes.
Yeah,
the
the
main
main
ones, let's say, if you could
Yeah.
put it in a hierarchical order, what would you say?
Well, one of the big lies is that everything we do for changing things for the better has to happen in collectives or groups. Like this, we call it collectivism in my circles. And what that is a term that's not talking about coming together as a community or a family or a nation or something like that. It's talking about this push that we see happening at the political level, and this is on the global level and on the regional level. Like here in Canada, we're experiencing it on full blast. I'm sure everybody else knows what I'm talking about, where we're being presented with all of these global challenges like climate change and all the gender issues and the battle of the sexes and pandemics and wars. We've got threats of wars and looming wars, economics, right? And while those issues themselves there are issues, of course, the way they're being told to us, the way they're being presented to us are the lies in a way. That's what I'm talking about, is that it's propagandized issues to induce a response from the public that leads the people that are crafting these lies towards the ends they're already trying to achieve, right? Like they're trying to use these issues to keep us in a state of fear, lockdown of our minds, really. And then say, well, the only solution is if we all just come together and fix these solutions by granting more power to these government agencies or these private corporations or these big tech, whatever it is. We got to centralize power and have sort of a one ring to rule them all type of world government system that will allow us to end all the wars, to stop all the climate change, to end all the pandemics, to deal with all the racism and all the things. If we could just have a totalitarian surveillance state that could micromanage every fine detail of your life, then we could finally have the utopia. So maybe I should say the first big lie is that we're going to achieve a global utopia by granting godlike power to Bill Gates, the WEF, the UN, the Communist International and friends, okay, all the people on the Jeffrey Epstein list, no doubt, and that's somehow how we're going to achieve a utopia, rather than what I feel is a better alternative, which would be to listen to the great wise sages and the great thinkers that have already talked about the solutions from the perspective of the individual and how to work on the individual level to create change in the world that will then affect the collective. So it's sort of like they're giving us a backwards, upside down solution to legitimate problems that in many ways you could say a lot of those problems are manufactured. Not saying they don't exist, but that they're fueled to exist. They're encouraged to exist so that these people can hide behind this sort of sheep's clothing and grant them the power to save us from those problems. So it's the old problem, reaction, solution kind of thing. I see that as one of the big ones. But I guess in that answer, there is a lot of those separate issues I brought up that you could look at as some of the major lies. But the big one is this is also a means of dividing us further from ourselves and from those around us. And so division is a huge thing. Distraction, we're constantly being distracted from the issues that I think we all really do care about and we want to find solutions to. And we're being distracted from the truth tellers out there that actually have real good solutions to those problems. And we're being told, no, we got to listen to Greta Thunberg and Kim Kardashian and Lady Gaga and I don't know, all the late night comedians or whatever in the mainstream media shit. Like that's who we should listen to for our saving grace. And to me, that's just the start of some of the lies that we could untangle here.
Yeah, I love the fact that is the number one, because I think you're right. I think the main lie is something that is using fear, distraction, and a whole host of other things in order to make sure that no one discovers the power that they have, or us to focus our energies
on what we really should be focusing on. It seems like as long as they can divide everyone with a whole host of things, and like you said, it's not that, we may have issues with the planet, or that we have some starvation going on here, or whatever that issue might be. It's fascinating. There's a Dutch, Jalen, see if you can find this for me. There's a Dutch lawyer who most people think is dead. And David, you might actually know who this guy is. I want to say his first name is Bertrand. He was a hedge fund guy hiding the money for the elite for a very long time. Do you know this guy's name?
I've just been hearing. Yeah, I think I know where you're going. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he was doing this for a very long time, and then all of a sudden he had a change, right? Because he ended up seeing some stuff. He got into banking, and they wanted him to, I guess, either sacrifice or commit some insane acts towards children, and it kind of broke him. And he came out and eventually told everything that was, kind of going on behind the scenes. And one of the most fascinating things, and this I want to ask you because I haven't had somebody with your caliber to ask this question to yet. One of the things he said was, listen, I'm in charge of hiding the money and making sure things happen and laundering money and doing all this for the very high elite. He said, you'd be shocked. He said, it's only a few thousand people, he said, that are controlling all of this, that are extremely, extremely powerful. And the interviewer was asking him, well, okay, so like, how does it work? And he said, they have to set up rules. They have to actually follow these rules. This is the thing. He said, but they're setting up the rules. They have to follow them. And so it was his job to follow the rules, but weave in and out and make sure things were, done in a way for them to launder money and do this here and to play this whole puppet show that that they've created. And so my question then comes to you is, who do you think has this power? Like, do you consider, most people nowadays, or it's very common in, like, let's say in this community, the alternative history and media community, to understand that presidents don't have the power that they, claim to have. We're generally now understanding that there's power behind that, with us, big pharma, some of these families, et cetera, maybe perhaps in the military. And so who is wielding this power to you? If you had to start to pick apart and to give us an idea of where people should start to look, to start to say, okay, well, if what you're saying is true, that they're distracting me and doing stuff, surely you know a little bit about who is behind, the puppet. And so to you, who is that?
Yeah, well, this is a sticky one because everybody's going to say, well, it's this group over here or it's that group over there. And, we don't have to get into that. But I actually think we're dealing with cultists. We're dealing with ancient cults that didn't go away, that have very particular religious-like belief systems that none of us have ever heard about before. Most of us have not heard about it unless we've actually taken the time to look into it. And no, it's not just some Catholics or some Jews or some Masons or some, these are all just, everybody just learned this stuff yesterday and they're thinking that that's the end of it. What I've learned from looking at this for a long time now, over 20 years, and studying with some of the best, in my opinion, is that we're dealing with definitely a mixed bag and actually competing groups. It's not just a monolithic one, we're all aligned. We're dealing with mafia type setups here where you have, okay, so maybe they're aligned in their quest for power and domination. Okay, that's where they're lined up with. Maybe people like you and I and the people listening can't even imagine that's what consumes your whole life. And that's what drives you, is just all you want is power and control. And you're raised in that environment and it's pushed on by cult ideology. Like, just think of this is what I ended up doing, is going on a deep research into cults, specific cults, both ancient and modern. I'm actually producing right now a series. I'm redoing an old series I did called Cults of Death and Power, which is trying to get to this question, who are we dealing with here? And I do this in a few different ways. I say, all right, we could sit comfortably with the idea that we're dealing with corrupted human beings that have a deranged psychotic mentality and that are driven by power and control. You could just go with that and go, okay, that makes a bit of sense. We've seen many examples of this in history. You got all the totalitarian regimes that have risen up and all the empires. And we definitely know there's been some weird cult stuff going on here and there. And I mean, just look at Hollywood for 5 minutes and what's going on with that. And then what you're telling me about this, who I know who this person is. I've seen those videos. And I've heard many such tales myself. And everybody is sort of on the outside of this, trying to identify this hidden enemy, when in a weird way, it's going to be impossible for the average person to really figure out who it is, because you can't directly know because of how disconnected and far away from it all we are. We can't even, in Canada, just give me an example, we can't even figure out the mess we're in. That's how bad it is. Like, that's how bad and disorganized the government appears to be on the surface here. If we were to send someone in to audit the actions of the Canadian government, I don't think they would come out of that audit for like at least 40 years, because it's just so backwards, right? So, and that's just that's just the federal government of Canada trying to get behind where did the corruption come in? Who are we've actually got a list of known traitors and embedded foreign assets in Canada. This came from CSIS, which is our intelligence community here. Be like our CIA. Literally went into Parliament and said there are dozens of known embedded foreign assets and traitors working within the Canadian government right now. And when we asked them, oh, could you tell us who that might be? They refuse to tell us who it is. So we're sitting there going, okay, so our government is loaded with a bunch of traitors and foreign assets that don't have Canadians' interests in mind. We've got statements from people like Klaus Schwab, who runs the World Economic Forum, saying how proud he is that he penetrated the cabinets of the Canadian government, right? And this is Davos, Switzerland, getting into like Knights Templar territory and the whole history, right? And you go, okay, what I'm trying to show you is just there's little hints of this, and the complexity of it is massive. So for me to say, we've really gone right to the end of it and found out who's at the top of the worldwide system, I mean, we've gotten close, but there's no way to know for sure. But I could sum it up in a general sense, and I could say we got a few options, and here they are. You got corrupted human beings that are raised in a particular belief system, similar to how anybody that was raised in a particular religion or even atheism or whatever. These people are raised in almost like a breakaway civilization kind of idea, where we're separate from everybody else. Our bloodlines have ruled for this long, and we need to maintain our hegemony, right? That's kind of the vibe. And then you go, okay, well, who are they? Well, they are of their own making. They are a breakaway civilization, a breakaway cult in a way, that basically view themselves as the vicars of the gods. They view themselves as the stand-ins, the rulers, the divine right of kings and whatever, and queens. There's that story to tell. But the thing is we're dealing with the world of the occult, meaning the hidden world, the secret world, the underground world. Like in John Wick, when he passes from the normal streets of Tokyo, goes through a few doors, hands a few gold coins, and now he's in this underground world of criminal, whatever. That's a symbolic rendition of what I'm talking about, that there's the surface world, and then there's the hidden criminal mafia enterprise world. There's the way the world we think, how the world we think is run, and then there's the way it really is run. And the best I've been able to look at, and we've been looking at this on the Unslaved podcast, Michael and I, and his research is second to none when it comes to this subject, is looking at it from the perspective of we've got these sort of lost ancient cults that we need to start looking into for the lineage of ideas, of symbols, of bloodlines, etc., of the people that are really ruling on the thrones of the earth today. And as I said, they don't come from anything in the public square. I like using that term. The public square is, we've got all the things that most people know about, all the religions, all the political, we got liberal and Democrat, Republican, this, and we got Jews and Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and atheists. And that's all the average person knows. Yeah, but where did all that stuff come from? Well, I've found, to my amazement, that a lot of those ideas and a lot of those belief systems and traditions were born out of older secret cults, underground movements, secret societies. And there's a whole history to that the world needs to catch up on in order to at least get closer to answering the question you've asked. And so that I'll say, okay, that's my first answer. Layer one will be, it's a human element of a bunch of corrupt psychotics that gain the positions of power, authority, and trust over time. And this is Game of Thrones /Risk. and they are in world domination mode, and that's what we're watching. Option 2, you could go with a more religious view, and you could get all spiritual and say, oh, maybe these are people who are possessed by some other dimensional or otherworldly entities that are having their own agenda, and these are sort of like puppets that are working on behalf of something not human, right? Which, as crazy as that might sound, as well as the third option I'm going to give you, it's actually kind of interesting, because just look at how anti-human this overall agenda is turning out to be. It's very anti-human. In fact, it's to the point where they're openly proposing humanity be reduced by 95+%. The remaining percent be integrated with technology to a level that will be unrecognizable. So essentially human 2.0, right? And I'm not saying technology or having technological integration is all bad, but like these people I'm talking about are like, yeah, we want to basically create a new Borg-like society, and that is the new human. And so it's like, oh, so you and the way these types of groups like the Club of Rome and some of these other groups talk about humanity, it's very much spiteful and hateful, and you guys are just a bunch of stupid apes or whatever, right? And so you go, wow, it's pretty anti-human, this agenda, right? Especially when you're talking about mass genocide and the fomenting of wars and all this kind of stuff. Like, who would do this? And then you get into the stuff you're pointing at with the underground sex trafficking, the blood cults, the stuff that goes on with children, the grooming of children, the organ harvesting. We don't have to go further than that. So yeah, you could sit there and make a case and say, I'll bet you there's some angels and demons shit going on, and there's some underground stuff, and maybe some interdimensional, I don't know, there's something there. So there's that explanation. And then there's the other explanation, which would just be we're dealing with people that aren't from here. We're dealing with maybe there's a big wide universe out there. Maybe this earth is not necessarily what we thought it was, in the fact that we're not alone, and maybe even our history is not purely only ours. Maybe there's something else that's been coming and going from this planet for a long time. Maybe even the fact that we're here in the guise that we are, standing out like a sore thumb from the rest of nature and operating completely in an anti-natural way on the most part, is an indication that maybe we are essentially a slave-like planet that was genetically engineered or altered at some point, or even psychologically altered to operate as a slave species in a way for something that isn't us. And that's why what we're seeing is essentially a sort of management team that's just coming in to manage the farm in the way a farmer manages his cattle. And that's how they view us, is just they're superior to us. And they feel like they created us, or at least imprinted their DNA into our DNA. And that's why they treat us the way they do. So I'm not saying I fully buy in on any. I just say those are the three options I've come up with, is we're dealing either with some humans, some kind of demonic force, other dimensional, whatever, you can't even explain it, or something very physical that's just highly advanced, isn't us, and isn't part of the human civilization, which is why the anti-human agenda isn't a big deal for them, as it would be for people that are members of the human family. You know what I mean? So there's my best crack at it.
I think it's a great summary, to be perfectly honest. I mean, even before I touch on my thoughts, it's like the transhumanist movement also, just like, I agree with you. It's great that you and I can talk right now using this amazing stuff. Like it's all great. But at what point do I need to turn into the microphone? Like at what point do I need to have the chip inside? And at what point do I need to completely forget that I'm human? Because that's really where you guys are going, and downloading my consciousness into a damn machine because of what I don't understand, right? And so that anti-humanist whole sentiment should just ring kind of crazy when you start really looking at it like closely. But I think your summary is pretty good, to be perfectly honest, because it encompasses all of what I agree to seem to be the options for what it is. And it very well could be a nice little mix.
Yeah, we could be dealing with all three, exactly.
What you said, you know, and I don't know, but like, I'm also definitely obsessed. Whenever I hear or see some great research into breakaway civilizations, I'm obsessed with that, because it just boggles my mind, because it's definite, and we all understand that. Let's just keep it on the surface level. The government has some tricks, technology, and some things for sure that you and I don't have. right? We already understand that the internet and a lot of the things that they were using and doing, that was first within there. We know in propulsion, who's going to get the fastest plane and all this stuff first. Like, it's going to be the military. It's going to be that. So there are people, groups of people that have things and potentially knowledge, let's even go, that we don't have or that they get to use. They have technology and things and setups that we don't, need to have. That's just on the surface, government people versus your normal civilian. And then it can obviously go deeper than that. And so, but you also mentioned the Knights Templar. And so, and even now you smirk, we just had Knights Templar on, I believe.
Did you?
And Timothy Hogan. I'm not sure if you know that name. Have you heard that name?
I'll have to listen, see what they're telling you.
Well, you definitely have to. Jalen, you could throw up something here in a second if you could find Timothy, at least a picture and stuff like this. And now what he, basically what he set up as their mission was a very benevolent thing, that they have been through the society from
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it's just so beautiful and lovely. Yeah.
For the people, it's an underground society. We just trying to help move things along. And I believe he was a grandmaster of, we'll get all the information. We'll put it up here, obviously. But, these ancient cults, when I started digging into, I've got a few books here. I've got a mini library of stuff here. And when you start digging into, what is it? Is it, I want to say Pythagoras. Why does that sound so weird to me? Pythagoras, or is that his name? Pythagoras? Because I'm thinking of Pythagoras.
Pythagoras.
Yeah, Pythagoras. All of his studies into the ancient, we denote him as just, we put him as a footnote, just as a guy that came up with the Pythagorean theorem, and that's great, and that's what he did. And then you truly go read some research and go read what he was about, and he's part of this ancient mystic school that's teaching all of these thoughts and these things, and it's a huge school, and that helped formulate a lot of what we have in a lot of these ancient mystic schools and a lot of this push and all that. And you start to realize, what is going, like, why am I only hearing about one side of things? And who decided that this was important and the other one wasn't? Why are you hiding all of this knowledge, from these people? And so here we go. Thank you. Okay. So this is Timothy Hogan. He's a Templar. What is his title? Could you zoom in on that? Tim Hogan, we got it right there. Where's his medal is on him, Jalen, right in the middle, to the left of the, that right there. Zoom in on that. That'll tell us. Keep going. Pretty much, it's really small for us here.
Oh yeah, the pyramid and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, he was a nice guy, incredible. Everything he said made the Knights Templars, and he explained to me, I asked him, he said, I did ask, who is in this? And he said, the list is secret, but we do have those people that you talked about. Like I mentioned, like, you have people in the CIA and like any of those others. Like, yeah, we do. So I guess, could you just tell me what do you feel about the Knights Templar? What's wrong?
Yeah. So I don't want to, I'm not going to go after anybody as an individual because I don't know them.
Sure.
I also am not someone that believes in collective blame. Like, I don't look, oh, you're a Knights Templar, you're the agent of evil working for a satanic agenda or whatever. I'm not going to do that.
For sure.
But the thing is the history is pretty clear when it comes to how these secret societies were formed, who formed them, the wars that happened behind the scenes between various secret groups, and that we do see both good and evil coming out of these organizations. Okay, so just to say that, like, even when I talk, I focus a lot on the Knights of Malta specifically in my documentary series as related to the medical world. But today, the Hospitallers and the Templars is not a huge difference as it used to be. And I don't want to get into all the history of it, but just to kind of say that, just look at it from this angle, okay? If you brought on someone who was a representative of the Raelians, a cult, a UFO cult, right, with Rael, you ever hear about this? There's some documentaries
I don't think so.
on it.
Raelian sounds familiar, but no. Yeah.
So they have this like belief that it's very ancient. It's basically a lot of ancient alien theory that got turned into, because it was popular in the 70s and whatnot, and it got turned into a cult, like a UFO cult. And it wasn't one of those cults that got really crazy, like say a Jim Jones cult or the Order of the Solar Temple, which I'm going to get to, which is connected to the Templars. But it's just an example. And another example could be like Heaven's Gate. If you brought in someone who was a member of the Heaven's Gate cult, all of these members of these cults are going to say the same thing. They are going to say that their cult has been operating for the good of all humanity. And they are the most benevolent, squeaky clean organization to ever exist. And all of its members are just getting together to play some golf once in a while, maybe help each other up the food chain here and there, do a couple favors, couple secret handshakes, wink, wink, nod, nod, nothing to see here, guys. It's all for the utopia that we're trying to build. It's all for helping humanity evolve, of course. That's why we're here. I'm not going to, again, go after this one guy because maybe he genuinely is a good guy and means well. And,
Sure.
Don't forget, there are some good, benevolent, charitable things the Templars and the Shriners and the Hospitalers and the Masons have done. Of course. So has the UN. So has the World Health Organization. So has,
Yeah.
when I'm sitting here, I'm looking at it like from a Solzhenitsyn angle. Okay. Solzhenitsyn being a huge person for me because he was someone that survived the gulags of Russia, of communist Russia. Okay. He watched horrors that are unimaginable to most people. And somehow the man came out of all that and wrote like a genius and inspired entire generations towards freedom and warned the West about the encroaching socialist, communist, international agenda. And what he said about evil was brilliant. And I don't have the quote in front of me, but it was something to the effect of, it would be nice if we could just bring all the evil in the world and consolidate it at the feet of one group somewhere, and then just get rid of that group and be done with evil. He's like, that would be great if we could just do that. But he said, but it's a little stickier than that because good and evil as a potential strikes through the heart of every human being. So we have to reduce it down to the individual in order to understand the source of evil. And so if I'm sitting here collectively going, every single Knights Templar is an agent of evil, well, I think at the top, there is an evil agenda going on, and those people involved in it would disagree with me that it is evil, right? Just as if I went up to anybody that was a Maoist in China and waving that red book and going to the struggle sessions and they believed in what they were doing, and they believed it was for the good of humanity. And they believed it was for the good of the greater number, right? It's not about the individual to them. It's about, we're going to make changes in the world that will help all of humanity. This is the rhetoric that gets my ears perked up. Where to the average person, they go, that sounds just lovely. I'm going to go, yeah, that sounds like the starting of a horror story. And why don't you pull up a chair and let me regale you with cult leader after cult leader, religious leader after religious leader, insider Freemason after insider, that are all telling you the same story. Right now, the radical woke left, whatever you want to call it, is saying that their push to mutilate young children physically and psychologically for the rest of their lives is for the greater good. And so I can, even what they did during the pandemic, cutting off all human contact for the first time in human history was for the greater good, guys. We got to save people from the flu, for crying out loud, right? And not to say, I don't want to get into that, but anyways, and all the measures. Oh, and what they did to the people in Canada here, locking people in their homes, what they did to the people in Australia, putting them in actual internment camps for going to the beach. This all for the greater good, bro. And all this economic warfare and psychological warfare, well, we're doing it to alter humanity because you guys are all a bunch of, you're still stuck in the mud. You haven't evolved. And us intellectuals, us Templar intellectuals that come from elite bloodline families that are so powerful you don't even understand what that kind of power is, we are the ones that are here to help you, little man, evolve because you're too stupid to do it yourself. And that's how they talk to you. And so that's when I go, all right, thanks for admitting who you are and who you work for.
And so that brings up for me a really interesting question that I don't know if you will have any inkling if it's true or not, but has there or are there, let's put it, good secret societies from the ancient past that have been able, because I feel like I hear stories of those when that there's this, they've been around and they're the guardians of the humans and they're pushing for the good. Have you run across anything that could even potentially be called somebody who's at least been more good than evil?
I would say really quickly, anyone that maybe came from one of those organized societies and stepped out of that box as an individual to think for themselves and speak the truth without just speaking the party line, those are the people that are part of the good secret societies. That's just my general statement. But if you want to get specific, I've actually been thinking about this a lot, Will. I've been thinking about this a lot. You kind of go back to the old myths and legends, right? Isn't it funny that all the stories of religion, myth, whatever, there's always the protagonist and the antagonist. There's Enlil and Enki. There's Horus and Set. There's Jesus and Satan. There's a duality that we're learning about, right? And those are sort of like the big Hollywood projections of that concept. But I think it actually works. And I mean, even in the Enlil Enki story, it's like the idea of two brothers that both came, they were not human, and they were the gods, right? The Nephilim or the Anunnaki, the fallen ones. And they viewed humanity differently. One viewed humanity as a potential, as something that was like, looked at it like a parent that wanted to foster that child and help them grow and had benevolent intentions. And the other was like, no, it was a botched project. These guys are nothing. Let's just turn them into slaves, right? That's kind of the general thing. And it makes me think that let's just say there's something to that myth, okay? There's something to it. And over time, different cults of interpretation of those lines grew up to follow the ideology of that principle, of one principle being humanity are a bunch of slave creatures that should be enslaved, because the moral law would be they have to become intelligent enough to free themselves from the slavery. And if they haven't, then it's our right to rule them. That's their mentality, okay? The other side is, no, that's breaking some kind of moral universal law, and we don't have that right to do that. We should do a benevolent influence on humanity, no more than that. It's the prime directive. We can't interfere with an evolving species, right? And so it makes sense to me that, like, because I see plenty of evidence of cults that went with the former, like went with the first one that was like, yeah, humans are a bunch of freaking dogs. Let's just keep them under the leash and then gain our power in the world. There's plenty of cults out there and secret societies that go with that.
Right.
Clearly, just look at history and our present condition as your evidence. And then you got the other guys, and it makes me wonder if maybe there has been a battle going on behind the scenes. And that's what gives me hope, because as human beings, we know that we meet people that they operate morally and with integrity, and they mean well, and you can tell they have a good, positive view towards humanity. They don't want to harm anybody or steal from anybody or whatever. And then we know those people that they want to get away with murder. They want to get away with the worst shit possible, right? And they're not on that vein. So I think it's not a big stretch to say that goes not just up into the secret societies and even in the government and even in the CIA and the Knights Templar, that there are good people in those organizations. But let me just say that given the state of the world as it is now and as it has been, clearly the bad guys won out for a long time. I feel like if the good guys were winning this battle, and the Templars and the Masons and all the power elites were all just these misunderstood benevolent creatures, why the fuck is the world in the tattered mess that it is when you and I didn't start any of this shit?
Yeah.
Who's doing this, right? Yeah. So I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from on that. And then maybe give me your response. And I want to pull up a quote that will help you with this question. It comes from the Duke of Brunswick, and I'm going to tell you who he is, and it will give you a good indication. Go ahead, give me 1 second, give me your response, then I'll pull this up.
Well, because I was going to ask, maybe even, I feel like, and I haven't dug well enough into, let's say, Madame Blavatsky. I know you know for sure who she is, but if you remember, she was constantly saying, and God knows if she made it up or not, for her movement, the Theosophical Society obviously has been very influential in a whole host of ways, and all this. But I remember that she had, as a core portion of it, I feel like there was like 12
these like guys, and these like hidden guys that would send her letters, and they were physical letters and all this stuff. But the whole point behind them was that these are like the dudes that are like making sure nothing goes down. Like the world might be falling apart, but just before it does, these guys come in and, all right, we're all good. But to your point on number one, there's so many of the ancient cults and societies that we know that are still around to this present day that clearly don't have our best interest. It's just so clear. It would take you but an hour if you were completely ignorant on this subject to go and clearly confirm what we're talking about. But then, yeah, like you said, if the good guys were winning, it should look different. It should look different. And maybe we're in a time period because it seems like not everyone, but it seems like it's more in our face now, at least than it was 20 years ago. And so maybe there's this shift. I hear a lot of people claiming that we're in a shift and that it's moving like this. Is this the good guys winning? More of the human, society being aware of, hey, what's going on here, and then arming together and coming together and making that shift. And so I want to believe that there has to be, because based on what it's true. Like we do a blanket term on aliens. You ever notice that? Like,
Right, yeah.
aliens, bad. Like, okay, so if they're all individual, like they're not all robots. So like, if that's the case, some are good and some are bad, and so it's got to be, there has to be groups that have just been like, you know what, screw it. Like, we're just going to try and get these humans out of this mess, whatever it takes. And we're going to keep going at it, keep going at it. We might mess up a few times here or there, or make a deal with the devil because, we're playing the long game. But there's got to be. It's just got to be. So go ahead. I'm curious about this quote, though.
No, and I love the way you're thinking about that. I agree. That's how I see it. I actually feel that right now, in the end of 2024, we're in a different situation than we were maybe 5-10 years ago when it comes to this. I think there's been a lot of shakeup going on behind the scenes in a lot of these cults and in these even to intelligence communities, governments. I believe that we've had a lot of whistleblowers coming out from these different organizations. And I actually believe that most people are at least wanting and desiring to do good. Like they're wanting it. Like they might be joining these organizations not knowing that at the top there's a corrupted element. Like, say, some people in the CIA, for example, right? Which there's a great book on this by Victor Marchetti called The Cult of the CIA and the Cult of Intelligence. Very interesting way to put it. Where he talks about how, the vast majority of CIA agents are patriots that love their country and want to protect their country, right? But there is a core group of dark magicians that run and steer the CIA. And it could be said with the FBI. That's probably going to change with someone like Kash Patel going in there and kicking the door down. That's to be seen. But anyways, and then, we've even had in the FBI, we've had people like former director of Los Angeles division, Ted Gunderson, who came out and exposed the satanic conspiracy, the child trafficking. He was basically exposing Pizzagate stuff before it was cool. And they totally, shut him down. He passed away and then forgotten about. And I try to resurrect him, especially now when everybody's into this now. I'm like, hey, you need to go and give a thank you to people like Ted Gunderson, who are whistleblowers in these organizations, to come out and say, hey, there are good people in these organizations, but the corrupted elements at the top, right? So you could have brought on some Freemason guy or some Knight Templar guy who's going to say, I'm some Grand Master, as he believes. But the way secret societies work, as this, you could read Adam Weishaupt's own writings about this shit, when he's like, yeah, let every degree feel like they're at the top.
Yeah.
Like you think you're at the top, and the fact that you're on public podcasting means you're not near the top. We shouldn't even know what you look like if you're at the top. So give me a break. But anyways, here's someone who was at the top, Duke of Brunswick. He was the Grand Master of German Freemasonry. At the time, it was pretty much the world, council, okay, that he was a member of. And I got two quotes.
When are we talking? What time frame are we talking?
This would be 1700s, early 1700s. Okay. Yeah. So think about the time this is in, and this will lead to the next point we can get into. I did a presentation called The Occult Conspiracy, based on Michael Howard's work, where he gets into the history of these revolutions, the history of socialism and communism and fascism, and how it was all cooked up in these secret Masonic organizations. We can get into that. But here's Duke of Brunswick blowing the whistle and actually kind of freaking out about what he discovered. He said this: I have been convinced that we as an order, meaning we the Freemasons, have come under the power of some very evil occult order, profoundly versed in science, both occult and otherwise, and though not infallible, their methods being black magic, that is to say, so he's going to tell you what black magic is, electromagnetic power, hypnotism, and powerful suggestion, which all indicate that their goal is a power over human consciousness, which might hint at how powerful our consciousness is. Then he says, we are convinced that the order is being controlled by some sun order, after the nature of the Illuminati, if not by that order itself. Okay? So this isn't Alex Jones. This is the Duke of Brunswick, the head of masonry in Germany in the 1700s. He's got one more thing. He says, we see our edifice, meaning our great Masonic hall, crumbling and covering the ground with ruins. We see the destruction that our hands no longer arrest. A great sect arose, which, taking for its motto, listen, the good and happiness of man, worked in the darkness of the conspiracy to make the happiness of humanity a prey for itself, meaning Prey. This sect is known to everyone. Its brothers are known no less than in name. It is they who have undermined the foundations of the order to the point of complete overthrow. It is by them that all humanity has been poisoned and led astray for several generations. They began by casting odium on all religion. Their masters had nothing less in view than the thrones of the earth, and the governments of the nations was to be directed by their nocturnal clubs. The misuse of our order has produced all of the political and moral troubles with which the world is filled today. We must from this moment dissolve the whole order. So let me just summarize, okay? He's calling for the worldwide shutdown of masonry to quarantine the problem. That's how bad he saw it. And the way he describes this, describes this whole process reminds me of when I was listening to Yuri Bezmenov. I don't know if you saw that interview with Yuri Bezmenov. He's this is from the 80s, I think. He came in. It was G. Edward Griffin who actually brought him to America.
Yeah, I know.
He's a former KGB defector, okay, Yuri Bezmenov. And he basically came out to America and told them the plan of the Communist International, of how they're going to take America. And he gives you 4 stages of what he calls the 4 stages of ideological subversion. And it's how they play this sort of 5th generation asymmetrical warfare, right? So these aren't the alpha types. These are the more beta types that don't operate like overtly and go, okay, we're the new king. We're not like Genghis Khan. That's all gone. These are the people that get behind the throne like you're talking about, and they manipulate and they get their people in positions and they wear the costume and they play the game. But really they're working towards this other agenda, which is what he's describing here, somebody from the inside. And I've got like hundreds of quotes and snippets and writings in journals of these types of people talking about the same kind of concept, that they were taken over in the way that the communist regime would go in and infiltrate its enemy, pretend they are that, and then eventually overthrow and readjust the entire institution. So this is what's happened to our government. Our government has been captured in the way that the Masons were captured back in the day. And I would say our religious institutions, like we could get into a whole diatribe about how the Catholic Church, at one time was working towards probably a better Western civilization and was much more, whether you agree with religion or not is separate, but they were actually infiltrated and overthrown by what we call the Red Papists. The Red Papacy, the Communist International, got their way in and infiltrated the Catholic Church. I think it happened probably before the French Revolution, but that's another thing. And then what's happened to America? What's happened to our governments? What's happened to our medical institutions? I talk about this in my Cult of the Medics, that when I'm talking about the history of the corruption in Big Pharma, the medical mafia and all of that, I'm not throwing the odium on all doctors and everybody in the mix. I'm saying,
of course,
the institutions were captured by the Rockefeller interests and these other interests that had a different agenda. And so we were on a track in the West to have probably one of the most amazing advanced health systems ever. And it got co-opted by this infiltration process and deviated from its original track. So I that's why I don't like throw everybody under the bus. I just say, yeah, if there's humans involved and there's a corruptive potential, wherever we go, there we are, and it's going to become corrupt. And the only evidence I need to present here is the present state of the world. That's it.
And speaking of healthcare, though, which brings us right back, United Healthcare CEO, the hit.
Yes.
What to think of that?
Well, I mean, to me, that I don't know more than what I saw in the video that I couldn't. It was all over social media. You have to watch people getting whacked these days on social media. But it looked to me like they're dealing with a professional assassin. He had a few, the way, because I do a bit of firearms and whatnot. I'm not an expert, but I know how he's getting a few misfires happening with his firearm when he's shooting. Right?
Right.
And the way he effortlessly corrects course, fixes it, and then ends up finishing the hit. The guy's a pro. He's got a silencer on his pistol. He's hitting in broad daylight. He knows what he's doing. This isn't like some homeless guy mugging him or something. And so to me, it looks like, and I hear he was about to do something in court or something. I still have to follow up on all the story, but I've got a list of these types of people that have tried to come out and do something to expose what's going on. Even doctors that have just mysteriously died or something gone missing. And it makes me wonder if some of this stuff isn't just a cleanup job when maybe one of their people spoke a bit too loud or got a bit out of hand, or maybe grew a conscience and said, fuck it, I'm just going to go against the whole thing. And I feel like that's kind of what we're dealing with that situation and probably many others.
Yeah. And it's so, you mentioned a book about the CIA. I think you said the Cult of Intelligence. Was that it?
Yep. Yeah.
Have you heard of the Devil's Chessboard?
Oh yeah.
I forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with that book, which is actually interesting because I don't generally have, I started to listen to that book on audiobook originally. When they got to a certain section on, and I believe it was, what was the name of this? Not psychological warfare, but what we did to ourselves there. What is the name of this? The program that we had where we were testing on ourselves. It wasn't, Jesus, the movie is about it too. Clockwork Orange.
Oh, like Manchurian Candidate, MK Ultra.
MK Ultra. Thank you very
go.
much. MK Ultra. Yes. So MK Ultra, and how like they were taking their own, some of the people in CIA were putting their own kids up for that, and what was happening to them and all this stuff. I had to take a break from, like, I was listening to it really intrigued, like, wow, this is a great story. And it got so dark so quick. I was just like, all right, let me just take a break. So I took a break from it, and then I actually bought the book and then finished it. But I mean, it is mind-boggling. And like you said, it's a whole host of things. I mean, looking at things from black and white is just going to skew your, the truth. It's just going to, we all humans have different elements to them, and it's just going to make it harder for you. I mean, first off, I have to say, we should have booked like a 8-hour podcast. I didn't know this, but all right, let me close it up with one, because we're definitely gonna have to do this again and go down something, even specific. So if you could, in just a few minutes, I'm gonna give you something wild here. We've had some guests on, and I've never done, and I want to do a very in-depth look down this, but flat Earth, okay? I can't seem to, on the surface, obviously, I grew up in, 80s and 90s, just Earth is round. They told me this stuff. I don't have any reason to go against it, because why? They just told me the Earth is round. Okay, so the Earth is round. I didn't care. You have very interesting people that are into flat Earth. And I don't mean by crazy. I just mean very intellectual, and people who are gone and they look at history, they're looking at maps, they're looking at different things. Enough for me to say, I don't know, obviously. I'm still under the assumption that the Earth is round, because I don't know any better. But people that I respect, intellectual people, and people in very high positions that have also come to me behind the scenes, off camera, to explain to me some of the stuff and some of the, let's say, secrets of certain groups, from the Masons to other stuff, to holding secrets, to saying that flat Earth might be a potential portion of some hidden agenda and stuff like this. And so you've researched a whole lot of this. Do I need to have a breakdown of getting some people in here to talk about flat Earth or not? Is there anything there?
Okay. Let me just say, I have my own personal opinion of looking at that subject since 2014 when it came out.
Okay.
That's when it came out and became popular in the online alternative world. And I personally am against it in the sense that I'm not against anybody having their own independent inquiry. I believe that based on the amount of lies we've been told, it's understandable that we would go to this level. But I personally believe that many of the arguments that are posed by flat earthers have been aptly dealt with and countered. And I've actually created a channel. I have a channel on Telegram. Some people are going to hate me for this, but it doesn't matter. It's called Flat Earth Refuted. And what it is just the refutations that I found. I'm not, everybody can make up their own mind. And I encourage everybody to investigate and think for themselves. But I've started to see a lot of things over the years with that movement that started to actually give me the indication that this could be part of a psychological operation.
Psyop.
Okay.
I knew. Yeah.
That's where I sit. Okay.
Okay.
And I've given my case for it. I even did a whole 4-hour presentation of my take on it, even getting into the world that's never covered when people talk about this, which is human psychology and why we might gravitate towards that idea on a psychological level. I believe there are many independent ways that any person listening right now can verify for themselves what the shape of the planet is without having to go up into space or trusting NASA or any of that kind of shit. I think there's some shady shit going on with NASA. There's definitely some conspiracy stuff,
sure.
I think, going on there. But I think what's happening is it's a sort of a false equivalency where people are finding a lot of points of data where there's legitimate questions there, like what's going on in Antarctica, what's being hidden, what's, certain things, okay? But that doesn't equate to the earth is flat and we live in a dome and it's like blah, blah, right? So that's just my take. If you want to have a panel of people on to debate it, it might be one of the biggest shows you'll ever do just because of how entertaining this debate has become. I actually, I listen to flat earth debates on a regular basis, simply for the same reason that I watch UFC fights. It's just entertaining. And I'll tell everybody this, if you want to figure this out, there's something really cool happening very soon, actually, this month in December.
Okay.
And a bunch of people are going to Antarctica. It's called The Final Experiment. People can go and look up The Final Experiment. Actually, Will Duffy is the guy running it. You could have him on with, I don't know, pick your favorite flat earther if they'll come. Plenty
out there.
And you could have a little thing where he's going to basically, because there was, the reason he settled on this Antarctica thing was that there was for years and years and years, right from the beginning, and I have it all documented as well, flat earthers were saying there's no 24-hour sun in the south in Antarctica. There is in the north, they'll give you that, but not in the south. The reason they had to say that was because if that's the case, the earth can't be flat. It's clearly spherical, right?
Yeah.
So, and the sun, there's many proofs with just the sun alone you can get into, okay? But I would just say that what they're going to do is go and prove whether or not there is a 24-hour sun in Antarctica. And if there is a 24-hour sun, they're going to be live streaming it. They're going to be documenting it. They've got some flat earthers going. It took them forever to get these guys kicking and streaming to actually go. They've been saying they want to go, and then they're offered a paid trip to go, and nobody was taking them up. So finally, begrudgingly, a few of the flat earthers are ready to come out and go and do this. And then they've got some, I guess, globers that are going to go, and they're all going to be simultaneously streaming and documenting and doing this experiment, making this observation. Because if you go to Antarctica at this time of the year and you go to the southern part, and I can't remember exactly where they're landing and going to do it, but you should be able to see not just light in the sky. You should be able to see the sun 24 hours, and they're going to go for I don't know how many days just to make sure. They're also doing other experiments there to even get the debate to move forward, because there's claims that are made by flat earthers that are like, you can't, no matter what evidence you say, it's actually not true. They just go, no, it's this, it's this. So we're just trying to say, okay, then let's go there together and observe this phenomena and see what's what. So it's the end of this month. Go look it up. The Final Experiment. To me, that would be something people should follow if they just don't have the time. Because trust me, bro, getting into this, they're going to lead you into hours and hours and hours and hours and months and months and months of rabbit trails that you're going to have to follow to come back to, oh, I guess we just don't know. We need some things that we can do that can just kind of end this, because I think that this might be part of a reality distortion program. It's very much embedded with a very particular religious worldview. The founder, one of the first major flat earthers, Samuel Robotham, was actually a Christian socialist, and he was part of a very interesting occult society, to say the least. And some other figures in the movement have been in questionable circles as well. And many of the arguments they're making, I don't listen to their arguments just on the superficial level of what's the physical shape of the physical earth. I look at this as them talking in a sort of psychological speak about the state of consciousness, right? So that's kind of my general take, but we'd have to do a whole other show on it. But yeah, Final Experiment, go check it out. It's happening at the end of this month, and hopefully we can put this to bed once and for all.
That would be great. Yeah, because like you said, I do not have the time. I know what that leads to. One question leads to the next, to the next, and this experiment. Got to have this physicist on. Got to get this guy from NASA on here. Got to cross-reference. I'm not doing it either. But I love this, and I had actually thought that. I was like, whether it's space or Antarctica, someone go check, please, and then come back and let's just move it on. This should be something we should just be like, all right, cool. It is or it isn't. Done. And so
that's it.
Anyway, okay, listen, we're going to have to do this. My notes here are insane already, but this has been very, very enlightening. And I think a lot of people are going to touch. We didn't get to touch on some other great stuff yet. We definitely have to do it again. But for now, let's just say, where do you want everybody to go check out more from you?
Well, first of all, thank you. Well, this has been great. I really enjoyed it. You know your stuff. And so I'd love to come back, and I'll make sure I show up on time this time. And if people want to check out my work, I'm on X. You can look me up. I'm at Truth Warrior Dad on X. My main website is dwtruthwarrior.com. That's going to lead you to where you can find all of my stuff. My main place of publishing now is Substack. So you can find me on Substack. And then if you're curious about my work with Michael Tessarian, you can go and check us out at unslaved.com. It's a premium subscription podcast, but it is unique research that you literally will not find all in one place as you will on that platform. So those are the best places to find me.
Guys, and I can confirm I have done quite some digging throughout the Substack and your premium podcast for what is available to people there. It's absolutely unbelievable. So I truly do mean it, guys. Go check this out. If you're obviously still listening to this podcast, you're going to love it. And yeah, David, listen, we will definitely have to see you again, man. So thanks again.
Thank you, man. All the best.